So came straight from Europe to the US to coach, and I have, since I've been here, I've had international kids on our roster every year. So we'll kind of dig into a little bit of how that's happened and how we work with that as we go through. But this year we have 8 international kids on our roster. So I'm excited. And I just saw a few people have signed up to be on the call that also have a lot of international kids on their roster. So excited to chat a little bit about this today with everybody.
I'll go next.
Okay.
Is that okay? Okay. My name is Britney Anderson. I just finished my 5th year at Virginia Tech as an assistant coach. I'm transitioning between jobs. In my 5 years at Virginia Tech, we've had 4 international kids. Kind of over the last 3 years with Rad here at Virginia Tech as our GA, have been able to navigate it. And Mark has helped with navigating it as well.
I'll go. Hi, I'm Laura Harper. I am the head coach at Montverde Academy in Florida. We are an international school that actually has 93 countries represented. And prior to coming to Montverde, I was at the University of Florida and got into really understanding the international game from Kelly Ray Finley, who was our recruiting coordinator there. When I got to Montverde last July, we had 3 players. So I decided to go international because I felt like we could really sell that dream. And we ended up having 9 different countries and 6 languages on my team. So I got a little taste of everything.
And my name is Mark Williams. I work for Premier Basketball Report. We ventured out to international recruiting along with everything that we cover in the States about 8 years ago. And I was tasked with going international. And so I'm the one, I do all the international for us, cover events, players, education stuff. We've actually hosted a couple international NCAA events in Australia, New Zealand, grow that out to Europe in the next couple of years. And so really just, I spend more time overseas than I do in the States a lot of the time. So that's my experience.
Good, thank you. So to begin with, a lot of people that requested questions asked, how do you break into international recruiting? And can you guys elaborate a little bit more, like the channels that you will, use to find players?
Brad, can I start off on that? Because I think mine is probably going to be very different from the other two.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Obviously, with me, a lot of our international players come from contacts that I've already had overseas that I've coached against, or former teammates of mine who are now coaching in different countries. So, I've been very lucky that I already have those connections. But obviously, then I've also built new connections while I've been here at HBU. And one of the ways that, and I'll use an example right now, we have a freshman coming in from Australia. And when we took our team on a tour to Australia a few summers ago, we played against her club team. And that relationship that we built with that program has paid off. And we've now, signed their best junior player coming in as a freshman for us this year. So, we've been lucky that we've had opportunities to make new connections through things that we've done here at the school. But, I think a lot of people always ask me, how do you make these connections? And for me, obviously, I had some built in coming over here. But I've really had to work at it also because now more people are recruiting international kids. And so before, when I would have had connections, that could have probably got me a kid a little bit easier because I've known the person longer. And now, there's a lot more competition for us. So I've had to really work and develop new relationships and kind of expand from what was my national team network more to some club coaches and regional coaches. And then also, through Mark and PBR, get some new connections with some kids overseas also. So, I think it really depends on what you're looking for and what is right for your program. But you you really have to work at this. It's the same as you have to work with recruiting in the US. I don't think there's much difference in terms of making those connections. But you know, I was very lucky to have those national team connections, and they've definitely paid off for us in terms of getting those kids. I mean, this year we have 4 kids that came from playing with their national teams of our 8, and the others came through those connections also. So I see there's some people on the call that, you know, like I said, have a lot of international kids, and I know James at Davison obviously has a lot of Australian contacts himself, and has managed to get some great players from Australia. And then Ava at Wichita State is on the call, and you know, again, they both are similar to me, have previous contacts coming in, but I know they both work very hard to expand those contacts. So I think probably I have a bit of a different perspective because I came from overseas and I had those, you know, some contacts built in, but I do really try each year to expand my network internationally, because for our program, it's very important that we get the right fit of player, and international kids tend to work very well for us here. So it's important that I keep working. And that's why I was really excited to do this call today, to kind of listen to what everybody else had to say. So if I can maybe pass on to Britney and let her explain how she does things at Virginia Tech.
2 of our 3 international kids we have now know former players who played here at Virginia Tech. So we connected the dots that way. So we've had a couple kids that are from Australia and a couple from Canada, and that's how those young ladies ended up here. And then the other thing is that some of these kids that play in the FIBA tournaments, like they meet each other regardless of where they're from, and they want to play together, or they want to be in some area around each other. So the last trip we went on was to Belarus, and Georgia and Michaela met each other in Belarus, remembered each other from there. And then Michaela visited first, and then she told Georgia about it, and Georgia came and visited. So they know each other from the FIBA tournament. So that has been big, but we connected the dots through former players. And then another way that we've gotten contact with some players is when our kids go play internationally, they're playing against some high school age kids. So we're always like, hey, if you see anybody or you think of anybody, you play against somebody that's around that age, get their name and then go from there. So that's how we've connected the dots, but they've known somebody who's played at Virginia Tech, and then they asked them questions and they gave them the information on Virginia Tech.
For me, my experience is a little bit different. One of my best friends, Tisha Penachero, she is international. So in learning and going through her process as an agent, I started asking a ton of questions there. So that's where I started getting really interested in the international game. And then through Tisha, I met a lot of people in Spain. And then I played for Philadelphia Bells. So through Mike and Blue Star Europe, Dan Bowmaker really helped me, just as far as I would always ask his opinion about different players. And then finally I said, I just have to go myself. So last summer, I randomly went to Colombia for a week. And it was one of those, I didn't know where I was staying. I knew who I was going with, but I didn't get the 2 players that I went to see. But being there, taking pictures, people knowing that I was there, then I received a lot of information back from just random other kids doing that. So I went to Colombia, did a clinic there, and was just really able to market that experience. And ever since then, people knowing that I was over there, I was able to really get connections in South America specifically. And then now the latest year, a lot of Europeans have just reached out because they saw that I was comfortable. So it really just started with talking to a bunch of people.
Yeah, and for me, I had no experience in international recruiting, and I had to put a lot of boots on the ground, like go to multiple events, go to Australia, and really just meet people. You'd be surprised when you go to the events who. Now my roles are different. I can talk to whoever I want, but there's so many kids worldwide who want to come. And there's tons of people around the world who know kids who want to come. They just don't know how the process works. And so it's so much on connections, but you've got, it's, now this is my opinion, to do international recruiting, like you have to spend some time internationally. Like you have to go, you have to be at the events. You just can't watch the video and offer, and because those parents got to feel comfortable and stuff. And so, which is tough depending on what your budget is and what your head coach wants to do. But to get started is you call somebody. If you don't know, there's plenty of people in the game who do international recruiting. Ask them for their advice. See if they'll connect you with people in different countries. And most of the time, this community will help any way that we can. But it is, you got to put some boots on the ground, and you've got to put some roots and build some relationships, if you don't have any, with anybody and everybody that you can, because you never know who has a player and who doesn't. They may not have a player now, but they may have a player in 3 years. And it's all about that relationship that you can build.
They need our support right.
Brad, you got to unmute yourself.
Oh, my bad. I got
There
it.
you go.
So every single one of you guys touched a little bit about like finding players, and Mark, you know, you talked a lot about like going and seeing. What advice do you guys have in regards of, obviously not everybody have opportunity to go watch like in person, but like different resources, and also when you go overseas, what are your advice would be? Because a lot of people, you know, we all know FIBA, but there's so many other things that you can do while you're there. So maybe you guys can elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think one of my things would be just assume that most people that you're talking with over there don't understand the process. And I can speak because I was that person as a player. I had no clue. And when I came over here in the mid-90s to play, nobody was kind of giving us guidance on the rules, on, you know, how we should prepare for this. We were coming over blind. And you know, I talked about this yesterday, that when I'm recruiting and during the process, I really try and educate the players and the parents, if they're involved, on the process, and also how things are different with NCAA basketball. Because, you know, particularly in Europe, and I can speak again on that because I played over there, it's very different in the club environment in Europe than it is coming to play Division I basketball over here, because there's so many rules, and we didn't have any rules when I played overseas. I mean, it was a very different relationship you had with your coaching staffs. It was a different set of expectations, and it's much more rigid, and there's more to think about when you're coming over here as a player. And so during the process, I think that's important. And assume that they really don't know any of that. I mean, I don't think that I had heard the words SET when I was a player before I kind of got into the recruiting process, and it's not something that's required of kids over there. So really only kids that are looking to come and play will take the SET or the ACT. So, you know, it's important kind of stripping it right back to explaining even what those are, because a lot of parents have no clue why they have to take the SAT. And so I think, you know, just assuming that you're going in and that they're blind to this whole process. Now, some of them obviously work with people like Mark and are getting good advice, or Mark and Blue Star, etc., that are getting good advice there. But a lot of the kids and a lot of the coaches that you'll talk to don't have those connections. And so you may have to educate, you know, from the very start. And I think that's important. Like Mark kind of touched on this, like you may meet someone when you're over there and they may not have a player at that point, but they may have younger kids coming through their club program that in 3 or 4 years time are kids that may fit your needs and be really good for your program. And so developing that relationship through education, I think, is really important. I certainly wish that I'd had that as a player coming over here, you know, and I've tried, you know, when I was coaching overseas, to educate our players that were coming over this way, and also help and continue to help coaches back home understand the process, because it is so different. And we are all on the other side of it, and the people on the call are looking at it from a different angle. But when you're in their shoes and they don't know, they want to know the information. And I think, explaining that early on is going to be really important. So I think for me, that's one of the most important things, is the education of the process and the system when they get here as well.
I know for me personally, I've always tried to find an expert in every country that I recruit in. So if I don't know someone there that doesn't speak the language, that doesn't have a connection, that I haven't played in the country, I don't go that route. And when I know someone there, for example, when I went to Spain and I met Amaya Valdemoro, she's one of the best players of all time to play in Spain. So anytime that I need to talk to a player, I make sure that she speaks to them. And I just think, as far as establishing your network, then I said to her, introduce me to everyone you know. I want to know everyone that you know. And then I think you have to kind of be aggressive when you don't know anybody, and just admit that you don't know anyone, and meet more people.
One of the biggest things I learned this past year is that a lot of it is overwhelming for them. They realize they want to come over, they want to play in college, but you can't hit them and their parents with a whole lot of stuff at once. So with our last kid, it was like, okay, I need this. Okay, I need this. So we went step by step instead of just bombarding her with all this stuff that we needed, because if I'd have done that, she probably would have shut down and said, no, I'm not coming. But the process that's being talked about, I think if you break it down for them, they'll understand it better and it's easier for them. Because I think one of the things that we as coaches don't keep in mind is that they're moving, some of them are moving to the other side of the world to go play basketball in college. And that's a lot for them to grasp. So breaking it down for them and making it easier for them as far as getting their transcript and your test scores. And I just told our last kid, like, trust the process, trust that every little step that we do is going to get there. But I think sometimes we forget they're moving to the other side of the world. They're going to college. Some of them, their school year ends, like in Australia, they graduate in December. So the seasons are reversed. So they kind of are, they're picking up and moving their life. But if you come at them with a whole lot of stuff that you need in the beginning, and like, I need this, this, and this, some of them will shut down and some of them will just not respond to you. So as far as the process, letting their parents know that it can be done, and helping them understand the steps that need to be done for them to get through it. But they get bombarded a lot with a lot of things that they need. So it makes it hard for them.
Well, and from a recruiter side, I would encourage you, like, if you're just now getting started in international, take a look at, what countries are a lot of international kids coming from. Some of the hotspots right now are Australia, Spain, you got Great Britain, places where a lot of kids are coming over. And that's going to help if you start looking there and make contacts there, because there's a ton of people who are helping those kids come over that you're probably getting emails from. The other thing is like Laura said, on the countries, educate yourself on the countries, because so many countries have really good players that may just miss the cut on the national team. But every single country has an under 18s and under 16s championship. Whether it's Spain in May, whether it's Australia, which is in April and July, whether it's New Zealand, which is in July, whether it's Great Britain and their leagues, whether there's kids that are not on the national team that dream to come over, and they'll be more eager to come over than your national team kids are, because a lot of your national teams are going to get pro contract offers or offers with academies in Europe. And there's kids that are really good and kind of can help a lot of teams at the Division I level and down that aren't going to be on the national team. So educate yourself on the leagues, on the junior championship, because that's where you can see a lot of kids. I can tell you right now, if you want to recruit Australia, there's an under 18s championship in April every year, and that's the one event in Australia to be at. And I mean, that's where you start. If you don't try to recruit the whole world, find pockets that you can be educated on, and you can put some roots down and try to stay within that lane. And then you can add lanes to your road as you get more experience. But I mean, that's advice I would give to somebody just now starting out. in international recruiting is to do that.
Mark, I think that's a good point. I think, from a European standpoint, there are 3 levels of European championships, and a lot of people don't even know about the 3rd level because the standard typically isn't great, but there are always some players there that can play over here. And I think, depending on the level that you're coaching at, you shouldn't dismiss looking at that Euro C division, because, there may be a kid. I mean, and I'll use it. There's been kids previously, like one kid from Andorra who was a great player and could have played Division 1 ball. There may be a kid from Malta, which I think there's one that went last year and played D1. Like there's going to be kids that are hidden in those lower level European competitions. And, so depending on what you're looking for and which level you're coaching at, like Mark said, there's kids all over that want to play over here. And that are good enough to play over here. It's just doing the work to find where they are. And those are all streamed now as well. So if you can't get across with your budget and it doesn't let you fly over there, then you can watch a lot of these online and get in touch with coaches that way. But I do agree that I think you have to put the groundwork in and meet people in order to develop those relationships in person if you can. It's not impossible to not do that. But it's a lot tougher. And I think, there's definitely a lot of places both in Europe and in Australia. And, we've had a lot of kids recently contact us from Asia as well, and that are looking more so to come play in the States. And we had one kid that just graduated with us from Uzbekistan. And she, has just astounded me that she had a 4.0 throughout her whole career here, and English was her 3rd language coming in, and just was a great player for us and a great kid, and was the only kid on her team that really probably could have played D1 basketball. But you can find them, and sometimes you luck out on them, but there's so many opportunities to find these kids at every level.
Absolutely. And I would think if you're in Europe, there's a league called the European Girls Basketball League, EGBL. Yeah. And they have a ton of clubs that play. And there's some national team kids, but it's great competition. And it's clubs and some national teams. And if you wanted to find a pocket in Europe that's outside the national, like that would be a great place to start. And a lot of their stuff is live streamed. And they have a ton of Eastern European, all the way over to the Netherlands. They're kind of moving their way west in Europe and adding, but I mean, just from the European standpoint. The other one I would suggest is with the NBA Global Academy is you need to get a hold of Blair Hardick. What the NBA is doing with the Global Academy and their move to help young ladies get to the States from all over is huge. And they're, I mean, right now there's a 6'2" girl, 21. She goes by Honey. But if she was in the States, she'd be a top 75 kid. But she's from India. But the NBA Global Academy in Africa, India, South America, Latin America, they're making huge strides, and they're really pushing kids and helping kids in the pathway to get to the States or to high school. I know Lars had some of those kids. And even to the high school route, and really just trying to help smooth that process up.
Yeah, I think like one other thing that I can suggest, and this is fairly easy to do and doesn't cost you any money, is to go and contact the federations, the international federations, because most of them will have coaches meetings at least once throughout the year. Most of them have 2, where their coaches all get together and they have a coach development conference. And there's opportunities to speak with those coaches and be connected with those coaches. And I think that's definitely helped me in some countries be able to connect with more than one person at a time, but and just make some new contacts and particularly kind of the club contacts underneath the national team level. And like I say, that's not going to cost you any money to do that. It just takes your time reaching out to the international federations and trying to get the contact in order to get to the right place at the right time. But a lot of that can be done on Zoom calls and, just really help you to connect with people that are working with the kids that you're looking to bring over here.
To piggyback off of what Mark said, Blair is amazing, and you need to follow her social media. So that's another thing. We have to use social media to our advantage. So I'll go on her NBA stuff and I'll look at all the kids that she has, look at all the videos that she's posted. And I mean, regardless of whether I was in high school or college, I would start talking to these kids now and get their story, because Blair knows everything about every single one of those kids. She sent me a stud from Mexico named Mariana Valenzuela. And the only way I found out about her was through Blair. She knew about the mom. She has video. She has everything. And it's all on her Instagram. And then I even went further, followed her Instagram, and then looked at the people following her. So there was a few coaches that were there, and then I'm going and I'm stalking their pages and seeing some of the videos of the players that they're posting and just talking and asking, who do you know? I got in touch with a bunch.
And they're more into Instagram's kind of the big deal right now. But those are clear communication wise. The biggest thing is international kids, American kids, and international kids even more don't understand the recruiting process. I talked to a girl about 2 weeks ago from Switzerland. She has since committed to Maryland, but she was talking to numerous schools all at the same time. And I asked her straight up, who do you have offers from? And she just listed everybody who had either sent her a letter or made a phone call. Like, they don't know the difference. A letter doesn't mean anything different than an offer. And so a lot of, when you go through it, and if you're going to be successful internationally, it is educating the players through the process, whether they pick your university or not. And it's helping them understand the NCAA Eligibility Center, the SAT, ACT, the TOEFL, what's a transcript, because most of the world does not call it a transcript. A GPA, grade point average. We're the only ones in the world who do it. And so it is educating them on all that in the United States process. Most of your communication is going to be with the player and probably their club coach. Their parents will be involved some, but that's not who most of your conversation is going to be until the end, until it's time to make a decision and mom and dad want to make sure you're all good and it's safe. But the biggest deal with the process is you have to take a route of educating them, not just selling your university. It's educating them on the process. And if you do that, then they'll feel comfortable, more comfortable with you and coming over, as opposed to you just talking about how great your university is.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. One of the things I think, to piggyback off of Mark said, they don't know the difference in levels. So when you say like Power 5, or you say where high, mid, major, they don't know. And some of them really don't know the difference between Division 1, 2, and 3. They don't know. So educating them on that. With our last international kid, the other biggest thing was, when is she going to be able to come home, and how long will she be able to come home? So they want to know like when they're going to get a break to be able to come home. And then we also have, and I'm sure all schools have this, we have a department that deals just with like international travels of the students. So them having a point of contact of somebody, and their parents having a point of contact of somebody outside of the coaching staff that they can ask questions about their daughter's travel, about their visa stuff, about any paperwork, getting stuff filled out. Letting them know that that is part of the process, but there's somebody in place that'll make sure their paperwork is taken care of, make sure the paperwork is done. But a lot of these kids, like, their parents are on Facebook, they see stuff. Like Mark said, they don't really do Twitter, Instagram, but they don't know the difference in like levels. So pictures being posted on Instagram, it looks the same to them. They really don't know. And some kids are making a decision without coming over to visit a university. And then once they get here, they realize the difference in level. And so if you are whatever level that you're at, and they might be talking to somebody, this isn't against another school that's on here, but they might be talking to somebody like, do you want to play at the highest level? Do you want to play mid-major? Like, what do you want to do and what do you want to get out of your career? Talking to them about that, but also talking to their coaches about if they're part of their international team, them being able to come back and play in the summertime if they have the opportunity to try out for the team. because with some of the girls, that's like their pride and joy to be able to come back and try out for their national team and then go from there. So making sure that you're clear on like their breaks that they could get, they might not get breaks. If you are a team that does plays, well, with COVID, it's probably not gonna happen for a while, but if you take international trips, letting them know that there's a possibility you can come back. We did it last summer, they can play in front of their family. That's big for them to see like their college team, but they don't know the difference in levels.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And when I was on the other side of this and I was helping kids come to the States from Europe, I kind of put together like a list of questions that were holistic questions, not just about basketball, like really to kind of help them ask the right things. Mark kind of touched on this about, you know, the fact that you're probably going to have most of your communication with the players. That's absolutely right. I mean, you know, I rarely talk to the parents when we're recruiting international kids, and not because I don't want to, but because the players are the ones that are being a little bit more proactive and reaching out and setting up the calls and taking care of paperwork. I've had 3 players that, you know, they've told me like, well, my parents don't speak English, so, you know, they don't need to speak to you, which kind of floored me at the time. But, you know, they signed and they came over and I didn't even speak to their parents, which I can't imagine that happening here, but, you know, it does with some kids. And I think that list of questions, I mean, I still give that out to kids now that ask me, like, what should I be asking? And I know that Mark, you're kind of helping the kids that you're working with do that. And some other people are also, but I think, you know, that's really important, you know, touching on, they don't understand this whole process. And I talked to Rad about this the other day. Like I came over here in the mid-90s with 2 bags, you know, and I got to Texas and got off the plane and I had no bedding. Like I hadn't, you know, I was like, they showed me my apartment and I was like, oh, it was bare and I had nothing with me. And then nobody took me to a store. So I was like, well, what am I supposed to sleep on? You know, and, you know, obviously having done it, we kind of know now what we should be doing when kids are arriving here with us. But I mean, you really have to think about, these kids are different than the kids that you have, that you signed in state, or, you know, that are coming from neighboring states, because they're probably going to have much more support and prep and things with them when they arrive, as opposed to coming with 2 bags and landing on your doorstep. And I think, you know, I always think back to when I did it and how I felt. And I was so overwhelmed when I arrived here as a player at 19 and was like, couldn't believe I was here, you know, finally playing D1 basketball. It's my dream. And I didn't have at that time really too much support from our coaching staff, because I don't think they really knew how to navigate international players, even though there was several of us on the team. And so I think that part of it is important as well. Like, yes, we have to educate the people that we're trying to recruit through the coaches, the parents, the players, but we also have to make sure that we're educated and we understand the changes that we have to adapt to when players actually get here with us, because it is different. It's not the same as just having a kid, like I said, in state arrive with you. So I think that's something important when you are recruiting international kids, that you have to think about those steps also.
And I also think that you need to do your research, because sometimes these kids reach out to you and their coaches know nothing about it and they're against them coming. So I think it's so important to know your approach and then make sure who's really the main point of contact. Because sometimes it's like the club coach, sometimes it's another coach, sometimes it's an uncle, you know. And I think that even when I was at Florida, we had to be really, really diligent on knowing, do they even really want them to come, or do they want them to stay pro? And then if they want them to stay pro, then they might say something negative. So just really finding someone that can get to the bottom of the why behind why the kid wants to come. Because a lot of times these kids are like, well, I just want to go to the States. And, you know, sometimes the adults don't back them up on that.
Well, and I think it's another good question as you're talking to the kid is you need to ask the kid, hey, who is helping you in the process? Because majority of kids that are coming over has somebody who is helping them, whether it's a club coach, whether it's somebody within the federation, whether it's somebody with a scouting service, whether it's somebody offering player services. There is somebody who is assisting them and helping this idea of going to play Division I basketball. And there are tons of people. And so part of the process is you need to build relationships with the players, but you also need to build relationships with that person who can be in your corner with this kid. Because that's typically who's going to help them get all the transcripts and the GPA, NCAA eligibility center. But ask them, I mean, that's a very clear question. Hey, who is helping you in the recruiting process? And they'll usually shoot you who it is. And if you don't know who it is, then, hey, ask what's the best way to contact them. Because A, you can help get that person in your corner, help guide them through the process if they don't know. But B, that's a huge another contact in that country who may help on that player, but if not that player, future players. So that's a good question to ask is, hey, who else is helping you?
One of the things that, they're student athletes at the end of the day. And one of the things that they're students, and how do you guys suggest and advise other coaches to help to transition them as a students?
Well, I guess I'll start. The biggest thing is you need to help them. You're going to have to help them with everything. You're going to help them with visa. You're going to have to understand. I mean, one of the biggest things is when they come over and come on your campus, their phone from home is not going to work here. And it's a little thing you don't think about it, but like the phone, like Donna said, when she came over, she didn't have bedding. She didn't have stuff in the apartment. Make sure that when they come, that when they first step on campus, it's all overwhelming anyways, like any freshman, but you need to go above and beyond to make sure they have what they need, bedding, a cell phone that works, to anything they need academically, to, hey, find people at your university who may speak the same language, a community of, if I sign a kid from Hungary, a community of people from Hungary, students from Hungary, because it'll be so much more comfortable for them to speak their native language. Somebody can make a Hungarian meal, those type of things to help make them comfortable. But any little thing, try to think of it and think beyond it. But it's the little things that make a big difference.
Yeah, Mark, I think you're right about the phone. For sure. Like when we have them come in the first week, we go through all that stuff. So a member of staff or one of our senior players will make sure they get their phone taken care of, a bank account, because obviously it's a lot easier for them to open a bank account here. There are obviously ways they can transfer money now, but most of them want an account so they can cash checks, etc., that they get here. And then for us, being in a big city, we're very lucky that with the population that we have, that we're able to find connections off campus for them as well. So you talked about people on campus, Mark. Like we look at, is there a Polish restaurant, in Houston? We have a large Nigerian community not too far from our campus. And so, when one of our current players came on her visit, we ate at one of those restaurants and now connected her with some people so that, she has people around her out with the team that she can feel comfortable with. And for us, like I say, we're lucky. We've got lots of opportunities for kids from different countries in Houston that we can do that with, which is part of the reason that we do and are able to recruit so many international kids, because although we are a smaller campus, there's so many other connections off of our campus for them, that they really like and take advantage of. So I think, for our staff, we have a kind of checklist, like what do we need to do with those international kids? And now that we've had them every year, it just becomes, it's like second nature to us that we know exactly what we have to do on day 1 through day 7 with them that first week. But it's just be mindful, it is overwhelming and it's exciting as well. This is their dream. And, when they finally get here, it's probably going to be, they're going to be exhausted emotionally. And I think, you know, just being mindful of that, and the way you are with your kids coming from the US, but think about what they don't have and they need help to get when they do arrive here.
I agree on the part of like helping them get a bank account set up, because they really don't know what to do as far as their parents being able to send them money. But we literally have held their hand for like the first 2 weeks. So as far as them knowing where they're going to class, hey, do you know where you're going to class? Do you want to walk with one of your teammates or something like that? Because sometimes they won't ask. So literally it's like holding their hand, walking them to class, making sure that they have, like Georgia came over in December, and it's freezing cold outside, making sure that we had whatever gear, jacket, as far as that already for them so that they're comfortable. They don't have to feel like they have to fork out a lot of money to go get a jacket and go get a lot of other things in order to survive and be okay. But the biggest thing is making them come by the office, like, hey, I'll be in at this time, come by, say hi. And once they get comfortable doing that, I think they're mature to a certain extent as far as they're coming over, but extending an extra hand to them to have them come by the office, make sure they know where they're going. And then also breaking down like pretty much everything as if they don't know anything, because sometimes they're not comfortable enough to ask. And I think I also said this earlier, for them, it's them being able to see their family again. So them knowing when they'll have the opportunity to go back home to see their family, or if their family's coming over, making sure they know around like what time they'll have the least amount of stuff going on so they have time to spend with their family. And then making sure their teammates are inviting them to whatever, however, because some of them are transition, whether it's a language barrier thing, things of that sort. I think sometimes these kids, they're not very mindful of, she moved across the world to come here. So making sure that their teammates are taking care of them, not to the point where they're getting on their nerves, but to where they get to the point where they are comfortable.
I think another big thing that we don't think of is the food aspect. You know, there's a lot of different foods in a lot of different countries, and they eat at different times. Like, I'll never forget this year, I was thinking about pregame and we were having lunch. I want to say that we were having lunch too early for them. And they're like, Coach, we're not hungry at 12 o'clock. We usually eat lunch at 2 or 3. And we feel like that's why we were sluggish in the game, because we ate lunch too early. And it's just something that you don't think about, but literally the initial, when they come here, and if they don't necessarily have access to their food or things that they're used to, I think doing your research a little bit ahead of time for that is going to be extremely helpful. And in addition to this is why I think Montverde is so amazing, because, you know, we're that barrier to help them prepare for college. So we have a 4-tiered ESL program that we guarantee that our kids are going to leave completely fluent in English. So making sure that when they speak to you in English, and if it's broken or they make some like grammatical mistakes, to really correct them. I think a lot of times we look at them and just like, well, we understand what they mean, but we're not really helping them actually learn the English grammatically correct. And I think that's really, really important.
Laura, I like that you touched on the food part, because that's something that we do with our team. Obviously, with having as many internationals as we do, we actually try and get them together as a team to cook the foods that they would eat. So we buy all the ingredients, etc., and then have them make certain things, some of which I don't particularly think are very edible, but then others are, you know, surprisingly good. And so I think it's good that we try and, you know, encourage them to explain what they do eat. And like I say, some of them have been great and the kids love it, but that has gone down really well for us. And our international department on campus have actually tried to incorporate international nights at our games, where they bring in the international students on campus, but also from community colleges in the area that they're trying to recruit to the school, and done an international theme night. So working with our international people on campus has been really big for us. And you know, I think Britney mentioned it earlier, how important that connection is. But you know, I think as you go through their career here as well, there's other ways that you can connect those people with them and introduce them to other international students.
Well, and I think another thing is your compliance and your office as far as admittance and stuff like that. You need to become best friends with them because they'll smooth up the process for international kid and getting an I-9. You know, we haven't really hit on the visa thing. You know, there is a I-9 and a visa that they have to get through and all that kind of stuff. And most a lot of universities will have somebody within their business office who handles that kind of stuff. And that person needs to become your best friend within the process until you become familiar with the process. Because there's going to be a lot more immigration stuff, insurance. They have to have insurance when they come over. You know, they'll help you go through and make sure you have all that stuff done, and then that'll just make it smoother when the player gets on your campus. But you know, that's another good resource at your university that you need to really make your best friend in the process.
Another thing I just thought about that really got me is you really need to learn just some like social norms of the country that you're recruiting or that you're getting the kids from, because there are certain behaviors that are normal in one country that's not normal here. And then finding a good way to educate. Okay, for example, so I had a kid that we have dorm mothers at my school, and I had a kid that's going back and forth, like yelling loud at the dorm mom about a rule that she didn't believe was right. And I'm like, this is not how we talk to, you know, adults here. And she's like, well, in my country where I stay, I'm allowed to do this, that, and the third. And, you know, I was taken aback for a second, but we had a whole team talk about, okay, let's talk about what's normal in each and every one of y'all's country. How is it okay to talk to people? What is the normal thing with when you're eating with, you know, your family? Is it normal to have your phones out? And just really understanding just the normal behaviors of each country, because each one is so different. Like I had Spanish culture, they want to eat for 3 hours and they think that it's so rude that everyone else wants to leave. And they're like, coach, you don't make them stay, you know, it's not good for the team. And I didn't even think about that at all. And they were really offended that they felt like their teammates were leaving, you know what I mean, the table.
Kind of talking more about the classroom barrier, could you guys just kind of go further into, you know, obviously our athletes need to have a good GPA in order to stay eligible. Could you talk about textbooks, you know, how you help them with tutors, translators, things like that? If Coach Anderson, maybe you want to start us off on that topic.
So I've learned early, especially when they do summer classes, when they come over for summer school, that how the classroom is set up and how they're taught in such a big classroom can be overwhelming for some of them. So we kind of tell them sit in the first 2 rows. They don't understand the role of a tutor helping them. And sometimes here at Virginia Tech, like the tutor is a TA or GA that's in the classroom that's also working to become a professor. Somebody's actually in the classroom that can help them. But they don't get how the two go together. So for every class, they get a tutor. Regardless of how they feel about the class. We tell them they need to sit in the first couple rows. We do try to pair them with, especially with as freshmen, with another freshman in a class that they'll both be able to use as they go along, just so that they're comfortable going. But then you have to explain to them also the role of your academic advisor. So they'll have one on campus, and then they'll have one as student athlete support. So explaining to them the role, and then an engineer here and an engineer wherever they're coming from is completely different. So we don't do declare a major before you come in, because if they declare a major before they come in and it's completely over their head, they become intimidated and they feel like they can't do it. So they come in undecided, but their classes that they have, they will be with a teammate in the classroom. And then we also we force them to introduce themselves to their professor within the first couple of days of class. And we kind of do like a practice run through. Okay, you're introducing yourself to your professor. This is what you say. It can be short and sweet to the point. They might ask you questions, but make sure you stay in contact with them. I think it can be intimidating because they don't understand, like a professor is not there to tear you down and tell you everything you're doing wrong. They're to help you learn. But the tutor part, they don't really get as far as help. A lot of them are very independent. They've been doing it. They've been teaching themselves. They've been going on with that. So it's, we force them to do things, but we kind of do like a dry practice run of, hey, I'm your professor. What are you going to say to me? But we don't never, when they're not in a class by themselves, they're going to be with their teammates.
Yeah, for us, I mean, when we're recruiting, we have to be very mindful of our higher academic standards. So our kids are, you know, coming in, we're not so concerned about them academically as the adjustment to learning. And like Britney just talked about, like they're not used to the classroom setting, etc. And so we have a buddy system where we buddy them up with juniors and seniors and usually international players that effectively hold their hand for the first couple of weeks to get them through you know, those classes, and things like how to log into Blackboard and how to navigate your scores on Blackboard, etc. Because we just assume they'll figure that out sometimes, but again, it's so different. And so having a player who has done it themselves and has come from another country, explain it to them, sometimes it's better than us sitting in the office and going through everything with them. So we really, the buddy system tends to work a little bit better because it's coming from someone that has been in their shoes only a couple of years previously and has done it all at our school as a player. So I think, you know, that's been successful for us because, you know, they go through the same transition a lot of the US based kids, just with the nerves of being in college for the first time, but they have so many other transitions to worry about as well. So we really call on our upperclassmen to take care of them that first couple of weeks.
And okay, so we'll move on a little bit, transitioning, helping them on the court. That's something obviously that is huge, and it's very different in regards of the style of play, physicality. Can you guys just talk a little bit how you guys handle that, help them to transition in that?
Yeah, we actually do a glossary for each player, because one of the challenges that we find we have are basic basketball terms that we just take for granted that they don't understand. So one of our post players, we were telling her to flash, like flash to the high post. And she was like, what is flash? Like, what does that mean? And just had no clue what we were talking about. So, you know, and I think this goes to all your kids, like maybe the terminology that you're using is different to what they've grown up with in high school or club ball. And so, you know, I think explaining what you mean when you say certain words is important. So we're actually doing a team session next week on that with all of our kids. But we actually have one for different countries, because some kids find it harder than others to kind of adjust to the basketball terminology particularly. So that's one thing that we do like before they even get here to help with. I know that like our Icelandic girl last summer coming in had some challenges with some words, even though she had, you know, a lot of American teammates over there. It was just different for her being immersed in it all the time. So we had to kind of do a separate one for her to help her through. But that's kind of like before we get on the court. And then on the court, the buddy system part stays with them. So if you know, if they really feel like they're struggling, their first point of contact is their teammate, their buddy, who's been through it. And we really ask them to kind of the first few practices, few workouts, check in, be mindful and check in and ask questions, and then encourage them to come and talk to us. I think Britney mentioned like sometimes they don't want to talk to you. They don't want to come in the office because probably they don't want to seem like they're a pain and they, you know, they can't handle things. But we have our upperclassmen encourage them to come and talk if there's things they don't understand. So I think those are the two things that we do early on with ours to help them transition.
One of the things for us is, and I realized this when I went to Belarus, the game is much more physical over there. So in the beginning of the season during practice, everything is a foul because it's way more physical, way more contact, to get away with more. And some of the stuff that they've grown up, how they've grown up playing here, it's going to be a foul. They're going to be in foul trouble. So that's one of the things. We do watch a lot of film with them for terminology purposes, so they kind of know what we're looking for, how we do things. They'll watch film, and then they will have access to Synergy so that they can look at maybe a past player, some of our stuff from last year, and we might tell them somebody to like look up and see how they're playing like their game, and then tell us what they saw. If you tell them to come back to you with like information on what they saw, what they learned, like in different situations, using the terminology that you're giving them, it makes the transition easier for them. But the biggest thing is the fact, like they get away with way more. It's way more physical when they're playing FIBA. They're allowed to do more. It's pretty much no blood, no foul. Here, it's way, way, way different. So we call it very tight in practice to begin the season.
For me personally, everyone's traveling. So we spend the first like 2 weeks talking about 2 steps. Step 1, 2, like literally breaking down the footwork. They laugh at me because we have layup progressions, and the first progression is just a single leg drive off of one leg. And they look at me like, Coach, no, in FIBA, I was like, baby, this ain't FIBA. Like, that is a travel. You cannot take 3 steps to the basket. It's not allowed. And so that was, I don't know about y'all's players, but for me at the high school level, that was the biggest challenge. The other biggest challenge, I know, Britney, you said the physicality. My players came so small. So at Montverde, we lift 3 times a week. I mean, one of our leading scorers, she gained 20 pounds her sophomore year here. And that just really, really changed because she was just so little, you know, just simple landing mechanics. I asked, you know, can you jump off of one leg as opposed to like a split jump or some kind of, I don't know what you could necessarily call it, but we worked a lot on single leg fundamental things on how to properly really, really jump and land. I mean, like we did a single leg vertical jump test. And one of my kids, I lied to you not, got 7 inches and on one leg. And that was in the beginning of the beginning of the year. She just didn't know how to jump off of one leg, and everything was a 2-foot jump. So really being patient with those kind of things at the high school level. And I'm not sure, maybe you guys can speak on the college level, what you guys experience.
Well, and everybody's hit on it. From a basketball standpoint, majority of your kids don't grow up lifting weights. They'll do some body weight from clubs and national team, but they've never hit a weight room. You can say, hey, pick up a dumbbell, and they'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about, because they don't grow up in the weight room. They don't have weight rooms at every school and gyms, because majority of their schools internationally don't have a sports team. And if they do, it's recreational. So they don't have the physicality. So you will introduce them to the weight room, and that will help with the physicality. Harper talked about the traveling. There's a 0 step. And I mean, it's literally 3 steps on a layup. It is a travel. If they catch it, they can catch the ball and then take a step into it. That's a travel in the States. The differences between the NCAA rules and the FIBA international rules are a big adjustment for these kids on the court. And a lot of that you can start with showing video and stuff like that, but they won't really get it until they're there. The jump stop to a step through, it's called a travel all the time in the States, but it's not. And so those are the things on the court. Donna hit on the terminology on the court. I want to encourage you, if you're recruiting a kid and you get a kid to sign, use video early, you know, and say, hey, here's what we want you to do coming in. Here's clips. You got either assistant or a GA, somebody who can clip up. Hey, here's a 3, here's a 4, here's out of this set. Here's what we want you to do from a skill set standpoint. And that will help them understand some of the expectations coming over from what you want out of that position. You know, we talked about the language, you know, style of play is huge. You know, the shot clock is different. You're talking about a 24-second international shot clock, you know, coming over to a 30-second. That's huge. Going to high school, there is no shot clock. And they're like within 24 seconds, just forcing up a shot. And you're like, wait, we still got 6 more seconds. You know, understanding some of that kind of timing within it. the game has sped up internationally as far as playing full court pressure and playing a lot of man. And so that's some of the help transitionally, but language is huge. What you call things, Donna hit on that. But they're going to have the same struggles transitionally off the court as they will on the court. And that's where it's going to be important for y'all to be patient, and it's going to be some of the other skill work. Another thing that they struggle with is, from an international standpoint, most of them are in a pro model. In a pro model, you work in the gym as much as you want to work, and you have a coach who can work with you pretty much as you want. And then they come over to the NCAA, and the NCAA says you only got 8 hours a week. Well, coach, can you work me out after? And you have to say, hey, I only have so much time. That's an adjustment for them to understand. Why can't my coach continue to coach me if I want, another hour of skill stuff? And so that's some of the adjustments that they have to learn on the court.
Mark, can I just touch on something you said there? Because I know we've kind of talked about the traveling and all that kind of stuff. I think one of the things to bear in mind when you are coaching them is to tell, like, not to say that that's wrong, but to say that that's not how we do it here. Because I think some kids, and then that gets back to their coaches and their national team coaches, that you're telling them they're playing the game wrong. And if it's acceptable in different countries and that's how they're being taught, it's important not to offend people that you're trying to work with. And also, if these kids are going back to play in their national teams in the summer, I think the way we've kind of navigated it is, when you're with us, this is what we expect, and this is how we do it here. And we understand that maybe you're going to get taught something differently when you go back to your national team, but while you're here, this is how we need you to do it. And like you said, use video, use terminology, try and help and be patient with them, but try not to make it seem like they're being taught incorrectly on the other end, because it hasn't happened to us, but I've talked to multiple coaches who have lost kids because the kids get so frustrated that it's such a big transition for them and it's different, and they feel like they're trying to change their game completely. And I think just be respectful to the coaches that they may be back playing with each summer, and try to have a good relationship with them. I talked to Raj yesterday, I think for us, having a good relationship with the national team coaches they're playing with is important. I mean, I get an email regularly from one of our kids' national team coaches asking, what does she need to work on this summer while she's home with us? And, what do you think she really needs to develop? Is there anything we can do on our end? And so I do the same thing, because I want to have that good relationship with the national team coach, because I want those kids to be able to represent their country. It's such an honor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want them to feel comfortable that we are supporting them in doing that. And so it's important you don't cause any friction in that relationship. And whilst it may not seem that way, it can come across that way to some kids, that if you're telling them that's wrong, we don't do it like that, that's wrong, that can come across, and it can maybe backfire. So I think it's important just to bear in mind the language that we use with them when we are teaching different things on the floor.
Well, I think that's great, Donna, and I hadn't thought about, just that on the floor. And I want to encourage everybody, like, if you're recruiting a kid who has national team experience, you need to have a relationship with the federation. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, buts. If you don't, or if you don't want to go that step, that kid's not going to finish with you, and you're not going to get another kid from that country. Federations are changing. There's a changing of the guard where they used to be so much against it. Now what I'm seeing is they see the path as beneficial if the kid's in the right spot, if the kid's going to be taken care of, if the kid's going to be developed, if the kid's going to be sent back every year better than when they came over, because they see that the American pathway can help their national team improve, ultimately try to win a European or Asian championship, or get into the Olympics and stuff like that. So the mindset of the federations are shifting. But I mean, if you talk to somebody and they're against it, talk to the next person at the federation, because there's somebody there who's in support of it, who will help you. And if you're not willing to let that kid go back to the country for their national team stuff, in my opinion, don't waste your time with international recruiting, because you're just going to burn every bridge in that country. And you need to understand your time at your university is just a time and a phase in their development, but their ultimate goal is to represent that country nationally and Olympic qualifying, pro career, Olympics at some point. That's their ultimate goal. And as a university, we need to acknowledge that and just be part of that and encourage them. Go home, be part of your national team, and then come back and we'll continue what we're doing here.
Great stuff. We're going to open up for viewer questions. We have time for a couple. So Coach Menelik, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, so you guys have actually kind of touched on a little bit of what I asked. I asked it a little bit earlier in the chat, but first off, Menelik Fernandez, I'm up here in Canada. I'm the interim head coach at Fleming College. Pleasure to meet all of you. Thank you for taking the time to do this. It's been wonderful so far. I had two questions. The first of the two was what can international coaches do for you guys to help facilitate the process of recruiting? Obviously, education is a big component, as you guys have mentioned, but if there's any other tidbits of information in there. And then the second part, I'll just ask both because unfortunately I do actually have to run and I'll have to check the replay for your answers. The second part was what resources, if any, could help benefit you guys with talent identification to make the process easier of finding talent overseas. And I'll just add on to that question a little bit there, because not all of our best players end up playing for our national team in Canada. We have a lot of very good players who do. I'm not trying to diminish the ones that do, but there's lots of very good players who don't end up there. So I was just wondering from your perspectives if there was anything that could help you guys identify talent easier and what it would look like for you. Thanks again. And like I said, I'll check the replay. Thanks, Ashton, and pleasure, everyone.
Well, I think the biggest thing is he's right on. I mean, every national team only has 12 players. Two of the best kids from Canada, Lattimore and Dave Wilson, never played on the national team. And they're both going to Syracuse, and they're both legit. Now, they both came over. I think a growing trend from an international standpoint is bringing teams over to the States and watching and letting college coaches watch them play against Americans. That's huge, especially if you're not on the national team. I mean, that is ginormous, because the biggest question I get from college coaches on international kids is if they're not on the national team, how good is that level that they're really playing? Are you talking about rec league, or are we talking about second division pro league? How are they? I see what they're doing, but who are they doing this against? And so I think from an international standpoint, and I mean, there's teams coming from all over the world, is that they come to the States, spend some investment, a couple $1,000s to come over, play in the NCAA periods and play against Americans, and they can get a scholarship on one day, and they don't have to pay a dime after that. It'll be the best investment they'll ever make.
I agree, Mark. I think I was just noting some things down there, listening to him ask the question, but I think, it is hard if you don't know the level that when you're watching film on kids. And I think in terms of what can international coaches do, I think pitch your kids at the highest level that they can play against. So if they're not able to play on the national team, but you want to get them exposure, I think, Mark, you mentioned this earlier, teams, coming over here to play. I used to bring my team over in the summers and play in the old BCI tournaments and, things like that, where they would get exposure. And that's how a lot of the kids got recruited, was because they were playing against American kids. But obviously financially, some people can't do that. So it's finding the best level they can play against in that country. And in a lot of the countries, they have either pro leagues or semi-pro leagues. So pitch yourself against those teams so that coaches can see you go against players that have played maybe college basketball. I think that's for people that have played over there, have been over there a lot, it may be a little easier to determine the level. But if you haven't and you're starting fresh, I think it's important you look at that highest level. So pitching your team against the best competition that you can is going to be most important, and give those kids the best chance of being recruited. And I think that's huge. And secondly, on the talent ID perspective, I think every country has their own way of doing things. Some have great systems, you know, that are in place already. So, you know, like Australia, for example, has their Institute of Sport system, and you know, they ID the talent, bring them into those programs, and they play and get support through the institute. But I think, you know, it's really, really hard with as many kids now that want to play college basketball in the States. They're so scattered. And I think it's really important, you know, for us to try and find a way to get eyes on as many kids as possible in one place. And I think some federations do that really well. Some countries do it really well, and others are just getting started. So making sure that we can get a point of contact that can get as many kids to us as possible is important. And I think, you know, I can only speak for having worked with Mark on this. Like, I think PBR do a good job of trying to connect the schools to the people that are doing that. And Mark and I talked about this yesterday. He's not getting kids for us. He's connecting, making those initial connections for us. And we have to do the work on the back end. But I think, you know, they're doing a really good job. And there's some other programs as well that do that. You know, and I think as we move through with international recruiting, we're going to see some other countries come up with better ways of talent ID, because right now it's definitely fragmented in a lot of places.
To piggyback off you, every country typically puts out the kids who they invite to their under 16, under 18 camps, which is usually 20 to 30 names. And so if you want to find names, like, you know, Spain is a hotbed and they put over a lot of talent, they put out good kids. Find the list of names that they're inviting to that camp, as opposed just the 12 who make it. Canada, everybody does it. And if you look their federation page, you can find it. Now, you may need a Google translator to help you find it, but that'll at least help you grow your list of names. And then the other part is you got to kind of figure out the education part on each country. Because if they're 2003, then what year are they in a class and stuff. And so, you know, from a scouting point, I haven't really talked about scouting service, but it can be beneficial, it cannot. And everybody uses scouting services for different reasons. And there are some good scouting services out there from an international standpoint. You know, and they can help you in a couple different ways. Find players, you know, get you names, the contact stuff, education part on how to recruit in certain areas and do that kind of stuff. And so there is some benefit. You just got to make sure whatever international service, if you're going to do that from a budget standpoint, can help you and be very clear with that. Like, hey, here's my expectation. I mean, there's people who say, look, we're going to subscribe, and my expectation is you give me a player every year. And I go, I'm not an agent. I'll give you information, you got to do work. But that can be a helpful piece in the process if you need it. And there's different ways that they can help you. It's just, you know, what are you really needing? And then you can find somebody that can help you there.
Just to add to his question, what can the coaches do? Send more film other than just the highlights, and send more than just one game. Like on my kids, I try to watch at least 5 games because I want to break it down and tell them everything. You know, you can send a highlight, but it's just not enough. And I think that's, to me, the biggest discrepancy that I'm experiencing. Also, make sure that it's really clear that the education systems match. So, you know, some countries do the 13 years, some start in different times. So make sure as soon as you possibly can, transition to what it would be in the American system, so you know what year they would be, because so often these kids are classified one year and they're really actually, oh, you're a 17-year-old 10th grader. That's not right. So just make sure that all those things align, and send more film would be my recommendations.
Well, and there's a resource with the NCAA, International Student Athlete, that'll break down what they need academically. But I mean, the sooner you get, if you're recruiting an international kid, the sooner you can get a transcript in the NCAA eligibility, the better. Because like even in Australia, I'm dealing with an Australian right now. She's from Western Australia, and she's missing a couple credits because their system does not match with what the NCAA does. And so, you know, luckily they graduate in November. She'll be able to make up some classes, but get that transcript in earlier so you can start checking the boxes on the 16 courses. Because if you wait till the end, you may have signed a kid who will never be eligible because they just don't have the class type that the NCAA will accept.
Okay, well, I think that's pretty much all the questions we have from our viewers. So Rad and I just want to say thank you again to all four of you for taking time out of your day to speak to us on this. I feel more educated on this subject, and I feel like it was very beneficial. But do you guys mind to put in your contact information and email or phone number, if you're okay with it, in the chat for, you know, coaches that maybe didn't want to speak up tonight but maybe have questions in the future?